Welcome to this video about literary theory, which is a bunch of old ideas and some new language. Our experience of the world is not pure. It's filtered through many lenses. Our own identity, first of all, our age, race, gender, social class, ability, religious background, education, and many other facets of who we are. We also experience the world differently depending on our immediate circumstances, whether we're hungry or tired, too cold or hot, around friends or among strangers. All these external factors influence the way we interpret events and texts. But that's not all. Our experiences are also shaped by society. Each culture has values, and whatever culture you're raised in will unconsciously teach you how to identify success, beauty, truth, goodness, righteousness, and pretty much everything else that has value in your culture. It's impossible to take off all the lenses that we wear. But we can become aware that they exist. And when we know that they exist, we can choose which lenses we want to focus on. That brings us to the idea of literary theory. Literary theory, also called literary criticism, is a collection of ideas and methods we use to understand literature. Some of the fundamentals of literary criticism: it says that the way we read is a choice. Meaning is not absolute, it's constructed. We can choose what lenses we apply, and we can explore how each lens influences our interpretation of a text. Now, one little note before we continue. In literary theory, a text is anything that can be read. It's also called a work. So books are texts, but so are poems, posters, articles, commercials, films, paintings, songs, etc. Pretty much anything can be a text. When you apply a critical lens to a text, you are looking at that text in a certain way. You're asking particular questions and seeing what answers you get. If this sounds a bit confusing, don't worry. You've already been doing literary theory, but you just haven't known it. Here are some common types of prompts you might have had to answer in previous English classes. Have you ever felt like an outsider, like X character? How did you react? Analyze the way the poem uses imagery and descriptive language to develop a theme. How does this text fit the hero's journey? What historical events does this text reference? How has our understanding of these events changed since this text was written? Each of these questions is asking you to apply a different critical lens to a text. You've already been using literary theory, but now you'll have the language to more clearly define what you're doing. You can think of the critical lenses as particular types of questions. When you ask different questions, you get different answers. So how many critical lenses are there? There are lots. Up on the screen is a collection of some of the critical lenses. And we're not going to do all of them this semester, but we will actually do a lot of them. So which lens is best? Well, it depends on what you want to look for. No one lens gives the clearest view. All lenses have limitations, and applying different lenses to the same text can reveal different features of that text. But how do we know what analysis is right? And how do we know what the author intended? These are two different questions. Let's take a look at the second question first. How do we know what the author intended? It actually doesn't matter. Authors convey messages both intentionally and unintentionally, so intent is irrelevant. This is what French literary critic Roland Barthes called la mort de l'auteur. It means death of the author. Barthes argued that the creator's intentions for their work are separate from the work itself. We don't need to know their intentions in order to analyze their work. The work exists independently. So back to the first question. How do we know what analysis is right? Well, you've probably been thinking of analysis as right or wrong, and I want you to stop that. It's helpful to stop thinking of it in terms of right or wrong. Instead, think of analysis as supported or unsupported by the text. Literary theory asks what happens when you look at a text in this way. What meanings emerge? You might get multiple different meanings that are all supported by the text, or you might find that the text contradicts itself. Analyzing texts isn't about finding one perfect analysis that reveals the one true meaning, because that doesn't exist. Books are messy. That's one of the things that's great about them. You're not trying to guess the one interpretation that your teacher is looking for. So, what are my goals in teaching you literary theory? I want you to have tools to practice looking at texts in different ways. I want you to see what happens to meaning when you ask certain questions. And ultimately, I want you to focus less on being right and more on being curious. There is a lot to see in the world. We're going to practice different ways of looking. Thank you so much.